the Special District Advisory Committee meeting for San Diego LAFCO to order Friday, October 17th. Before we begin, I do want to welcome Tracy Largent from the port. She is our newest committee member. We'll be hearing from her later on about what's going on in the port, and I want to thank Hector Martinez for hosting all of us down here at Sweetwater. Thank you. With that, can we please have the roll call?
Kimberly Thorner.
Present.
Jack Beebe.
Present.
Ann Baldridge.
Here.
Paul Bushy.
Here.
Jeff Egon. Absent. James Gordon.
Here.
Tracy Largent.
Present.
Albert Lau.
Here.
Hector Martinez.
Here.
Rachel Mason is absent. Dave McQueen.
Present.
Marty Miller.
Here.
Mark Roback.
Present.
Joel Scazzetti is absent. Mike Sims.
Here.
So there is a quorum with 12 members present.
Thank you, Erica. With that, Mr. Martinez, will you lead us in the pledge? And I do believe that we're going to have it on the screen.
And if you are able, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On the agenda review, we do have a hard stop at 11:30 because we are starting a tour of the Reynolds facility at 11:30, and if you can't tell, this room is normally occupied by children who go through the hydro station, and I do believe we are displacing them this morning, so thank you for doing that for us. But we do have a 11:30 hard stop. The next item is open expression. Do we have anyone from the public that would like to speak to the committee either in person or online?
No.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll move on to consent very quickly. We have 4 items on consent. Would entertain a motion to approve consent.
I'll motion.
I got a first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, I
The
think
fire guys will second it.
mutually, all right. Any discussion? Anyone want to move anything on consent? Okay, with that, all those in favor of consent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, we are now on to our first business item, and it is item 5A in your packet, the update on the rolling 5-year study schedule. Priscilla, are you doing the honors today?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you, Chair Thorner. So good morning, committee members. Priscilla Montpower, Assistant Executive Officer on behalf of SDAC this morning. So before the committee today is our annual update to our rolling 5-year study schedule, which is essentially our roadmap for how we go about calendaring the municipal service reviews required of us under the legislature. The update follows our commission's approval in October to revise the 5-year schedule, which is included in your packets. And you'll recall that a few years ago, the commission transitioned away from a fixed study schedule to a rolling study schedule, which allows us to align the first 2 years to the adopted work plan, while then having the last 3 years, years 3, 4, and 5, be used as a telegraphing tool to the public agencies and to the public of the commission's intent to calendar those and to initiate those as part of a future work plan. So with that context, I'll walk you through some of the updates. And those are up on the screen. Hopefully you can see them. So first, we've removed the Oceanside Region MSR as we have completed that regional review. We've also added the San Diego Unified Port District, which is consistent with the adopted work plan. And then we've regrouped some of the agencies and how we're reviewing them within the regions and organizing them into more digestible parts and sparing you all from reading a 500-page report. So the refinement also improves efficiency without changing the scope of the reviews. And you'll notice, for example, Lucadia and Olivine, who are sitting here today, your reviews have been regrouped. So this now it's City of Carlsbad with the overlapping district of Carlsbad and WD, and then Encinitas and the overlapping districts or at least a majority of your district overlapping Encinitas. For the years 3 through 5, the most substantive changes include adding 5 new service-specific studies. So the first being a San Diego County wastewater GPA study, a county-wide recycled water services study, another focused on the county service areas, a county-wide police protection service study, and then finally a geological hazard abatement district study. The remaining changes are also just focused in on the regrouping.
What are geological hazard abatement districts?
Yeah, geological hazard abatement districts are typically formed to fund improvements on, I believe it's like erosion. So it's kind of like a funding mechanism to fund those improvements. So as far as that kind of concludes the changes that you'll be seeing in the study schedule. Again, the most substantive being those additions. And so that really concludes the summary of the updates, and I'm happy to take any questions.
So I'm assuming that many agencies overlap many different geographic areas, and so I'll use my agency for example. If we're doing our MSR right now, but come 27, 28, many of the CSDs that are listed, we procure recycled water from them. I'm assuming we're somehow going to be tied into those as well, maybe through their MSRs. Is that kind of the plan?
So as part of the MSR, we do look at the agreements or relationships that are in place.
Yeah.
And so I assume that we would certainly call it out and acknowledge that there is an agreement in place, but the focus would be the performance of that agency and how they're delivering services to their community.
Okay.
Or Kim, you have 3 more MSRs you have to do after this one.
Right. But that one we just take. Okay, no, that's good to know, because like I'm one of these CSDs, we take 100% of their effluent.
Okay.
So I know that we're going to be kind of pivotal in their MSR. So, but the focus is on them. We're ancillary,
Right.
basically. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have any question on the rollout plan? Thank you very much. You're welcome. I'm assuming you have the next item as well. Okay, item 5B is update on high priority projects, municipal service review on wholesale water agencies in San Diego County.
So I'll take this one once again. So this is just us coming back to you with another update on the progress to date on the MSR, comprehensive MSR on the 2 wholesale water service providers in the San Diego County region, with a focus on the San Diego County Water Authority. And this is before we do finalize a draft that we anticipate sharing with the 2 agencies this month. So today is an opportunity for all of you, this committee, to provide us with feedback on the scope and framing as we sort of think about some of the working thoughts now that we've been able to take Dr. Hanneman's draft and review it. So I'm going to jump in with sort of some overarching context or sort of an overarching theme before then I dive into some of the other things that we've been taking a look at as part of developing this MSR. So first is that we've observed that the County Water Authority has made remarkable progress in diversifying its water supply portfolio, but these achievements have come at a very steep financial cost. The cost structure created over the past 15 years is now colliding with dramatically changing water demand patterns and is producing a real-time stress test to not only the County Water Authority, but to its 22 member agencies. And so, as I mentioned, we're organizing our working thoughts into some key themes, and those are up on the screen. The first being the transformation period that has occurred at the County Water Authority, a structural problem that they're facing, some challenges that they have ahead, and then how this all ties into what LAFCO is tasked with in reviewing and how we think about how the County Water Authority is performing. So the first being this transformation period. So over the last 15 years, the County Water Authority has realized both the benefits, but also the costs of three major investments, which are shown up on the screen as part, or excuse me, in response to the drought crisis in 1991. So these three capital investments have certainly proven successful in reducing the County Water Authority's dependency on met supplies as intended, and is reflected as part of the 15-year reporting period, and specifically reducing their dependency on met from 88% in 2008 to 19% in 2023. And as a result, is able to accommodate just about its entire annual demand with drought resilient supplies through locked in long-term contracts. But the transformation period has come at a steep price and is being felt across the region, with water rates tripling to its member agencies to cover the costs of these capital investments. And this leads me to the structural problem and the County Water Authority's core financial vulnerability, and specifically the variance between their fixed costs and their variable. So 90 cents of every dollar in costs at the County Water Authority are fixed. So in simpler terms, the costs don't decline when less water is sold. And conversely, only 30 cents of every dollar in revenue is fixed, with the rest remaining variable. And this structural problem appears to have hit a tipping point in 2023, when falling demand combined with take-or-pay contracts with Imperial County meant that the County Water Authority had to pay for water that it didn't need and it couldn't sell. Now, the tipping point ties directly to the board and to their credit, recognizing this new reality and having to take a number of aggressive steps to try to stabilize the financial situation. So up on the screen are 4 measures that they've taken. But we recognize that there's still this big challenge ahead, and certainly something that the MSR is drilling down on, that while these actions have stabilized the immediate crisis, the structural problem remains, and with the challenge ahead being in the form of water reuse. So there are currently 3 projects, major projects in the queue, which are projected to drop demand further by another third, while water demand is already at a record low. And so those projects are up on the screen with featuring the City of San Diego Pure Water Project, the East County Advanced Water Purification, and the Oceanside expansion as well. So with all of this in mind, and as LAFCO staff sort of thinks about the legislature's ask of us to really think about how the County Water Authority is, or how LAFCO addresses community needs, present and future, and offer up potential remedies and recommendations to the County Water Authority, we've come up with 4 that are really coming to the forefront, and we anticipate will be a part of the full MSR. So the first is governance and accountability. The County Water Authority's vote allocation is based on a cumulative historical financial contribution. And so with 70% of their revenue still volumetric, we're seeing this potential divergence between who is making the investment decisions, but then who bears the cost burden moving forward. And the question in our mind is, how should LAFCO address this in terms of meeting community needs present and future? The second theme is with respect to potable reuse. And while we believe that potable reuse build out is certainly beneficial, it does create some wholesale level coordination challenges, and it signals that a reorganization may eventually be needed to better sync local water development with wholesale water procurement. Third is defining service adequacy. So in taking all of this information in, a growing question in our mind is, how does LAFCO define service adequacy when the physical water supply is secure, but their financial sustainability is very uncertain at this time? And lastly, a 4th theme that has come into focus is the positive shift in executive management at the County Water Authority over the past few years, and punctuated by the long-awaited settlement with Met after 15 years of litigation, marking an encouraging sign moving forward. So this brings me to a final note before sharing a few next steps. At this stage, staff is approaching the report as an informational tool rather than an action item. The goal being to identify these core concerns and then outline some potential public policy options consistent with LAFCO's role. And then giving the County Water Authority a 5-year window to make strategic adjustments as it deems appropriate. So with this in mind, I'll stop here as far as a summary on all of the information I just shared with you and where we are in drafting the MSR. But in terms of next steps, we do anticipate, again, sharing an administrative draft with the agencies this month. And once we receive their feedback, it would sit with them for a period of no less than 60 days. We'll incorporate their feedback. We'll come back to this committee as well as our the Commission Cities Special Cities Advisory Committee, and then also reconvene the ad hoc working group of the 11-member agencies that are giving us feedback specifically on the MSR. And then we anticipate as early as March of 2026 bringing the draft to our commission. So I'll conclude here, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thank you very much for your report. Do you want any feedback from the committee on those 4 items that you listed? Could we go back to
Absolutely.
the themes and maybe we can go through each of them, any feedback that you have on item number 1, 2, 3, and 4 as far as the committee goes? So the first one would be governance and accountability. The question being, how should LAFCO address this item in terms of meeting community needs present and future? And that is the voting power versus cost burden divergence. But that would start any comments, suggestions by the committee.
Just reading that, Kim, you know, is LAFCO's role to address those or to assess those? And in other words, I'm having a little disconnect as to what LAFCO could do other than a recommendation to the Water Authority Board, which consists of the member agencies. Address is kind of an ambiguous word to me. Is LAFCO going to fix that? Or, you know, I guess that would be an open-ended question.
I think I heard that they were going to make recommendations and then give the Water Authority 5 years to address it. And then I'm assuming in the next MSR, if they aren't addressed, LAFCO does have other tools, right? But I'm hearing this is a recommendations and 5-year to address the recommendations. Is that accurate?
That is correct, Chair Thorner. So approaching the MSR right now and the recommendations that come along with it as, again, an informational tool, and recognizing that the County Water Authority is taking several steps to address all of the core concerns that I've talked about, but of course, all of you, I'm sure, are hearing about, and seeing after that 5-year window, what strategic adjustments have been made, and if the commission deems appropriate, they do have the power to initiate, reorganizations of special districts, and not saying that that would happen, but certainly within their powers.
Mr. Lau?
So I do have a kind of wonky question on the related governance on the water authority side of it. But within the County Water Authority Act, I think there is a provision that's unique to the water authority. That for any agency with more than 6 members on the board, in the event the water authority has a conflict with, say, said agency, majority, they cannot exclude more than half of said agency or from a closed session. Typically, in a JPA format, if you have a conflict with said agency or member agency, in closed session, you have to exclude said agency just for purpose of potential conflict of interest. But in this case, within the water authority, seems like the water authority would be restricted and potentially confined to deal with those type of issues, especially if we don't have enough people under that framework to actually create a quorum in closed session. Therefore, they cannot make a decision. And they cannot take action. So that's something that it's kind of unique. It's different, but it's not something that within the purview that as part of the governance review, because it does create potential issues potentially, right? Especially in light, seems like in a lot of news, it seems like there's quite a bit of conflict that's going on right now.
So Lake Hodge is a good example of that?
Potential.
Yeah, so the water authority can never take an action to sue the city of San Diego. If the city of San Diego sued the water authority, they can never take any action in defense.
Well, that's a concrete example of what you're talking about. It needs to be addressed,
That
right?
would be an example.
Yes.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the
Yeah,
case.
because we still have, just to interject real quick, we have city of San Diego people there to create the quorum, yet there's a conflict, so it makes no sense.
General.
But I think that the question to ask here is in the future where the city is less reliant on the water authority, so they're investing in their own supplies and they're reducing their reliance on the water authority, is it equitable for them still to control the water authority? Essentially, that's the question in a direct way. I think that's being asked.
And I'll add on, I mean, the voting power versus cost burden is an issue for a lot of agencies. Many of us tried to get legislation introduced a few years ago because the current voting power is backward looking, right? It's your past contributions. And the reality is the contributions of the future, which you guys have pointed out, are not going to be the same. Those agencies that are rolling off are not going to have the same contributions, but yet they still hold the voting power. And one of our suggestions was a modification that, yes, it stays weighted, right? And that reflects the past contribution, but that there's a second test for each vote, and it's a majority of the agencies as well. Whereby there'd have to be compromise in the boardroom in order to pass an item. And having both of those reflects the past contributions, but then also looks to the future and equity that those agencies are rolling off, and they still have access. So say something goes down, they can still roll back on the water authority. And so that was having a voting power structure that reflects the new reality, I think is important to a lot of agencies.
It's also interesting because it's so widely different for different entities. So for Eastern, it's 5 at large. So every person's vote counts the same essentially within the service area. Where if you did the math within the water authority service area, you get a really weird thing where some entities, their per person vote is high, and other entities, their person per vote is very low. And it always seemed interesting to me to just see how that actually looks across their service area. Where a person essentially holds more of a vote because that district financially contributed more versus somewhere else where those people really have no vote because they haven't contributed. It's just kind of an interesting because it is so inconsistent across different water districts.
Any other comments, suggestions on the governance and accountability? Mr. Novak, and then Mr. Miller.
Okay, I'm not going to avoid specifics, because I think it's important. Somebody else that came up recently, the water authority. I've been on there a year, so January, it's not quite a year. I've been watching them for a long time, so I'm not going to get into what they did in the past in terms of investments like Carlos Vista, which is never made economic sense, but here we are. A good example, again, to be specific, we've had a conversation the last few months on project labor agreements, and because of the power of the city here recently, we are stuck with it, on a project, and added millions of dollars to our ratepayers, cost, and that's, it's not a good thing, so. Obviously with the water authority rolling off with, pure water. It's a governance issue. I mean, it was, like all the agencies except the majority of, more or less, the majority of the city of San Diego, carried the way. They're gonna have like 55%, is that how it works?
Depends on it.
I think that issue is 55.
Yeah, if they have more than 38% of the vote, it
Right.
has to be 55%.
Right, so let me just tell you, give you people that aren't there and watching this stuff. Like the delegates, the 10 San Diego delegates are convening, talking about this, trying to figure out the math on this. And they get it over the line. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. I mean, this is politics, the world we live in, but the bottom line is it's adding a lot of cost to our rates that are already the highest in the country. So this, nexus between expenses and rates and governance, what we're talking about here is, it needs to be addressed. We just can't have the 800-pound gorilla, it's not mine in the financial store, dictating the rest of us. So. Drop the mic.
Thank you for your directness. Mr. Miller?
So it's been a dilemma at the water authority for a long time. We actually had a committee try to form to try to study the governance and come up with a means of making it more equitable amongst all the other agencies and basically cut some of the control that the city has over the water authority, and it basically did not go anywhere because in order to do anything, you've got to have the city of San Diego agree to it. Because carrying 42% of the vote, they only need 1 or 2 agencies to go along with it to do anything or to stop anything. So that governance basically did not change, basically did not get off the ground. I think what would have to happen is we'd have to open up the act again and try to come to some kind of resolution on scaling back the percentage, because they're not going to do it out of goodwill. They're just not going to do it. Mark brings up the PLA. We actually had a very robust voting on one of the projects that we had. It was the staff actually recommended putting the job back out to bid without the PLA because they got very little response in the bidders. And the PLA, which I have been fighting against at both MET and the water authority on the smaller projects and the one-offs, restricts the voting to basically union contractors, and it puts all that into their bailiwick. And the unions are not responding to the bids with multiple contestants for the projects. We're basically getting 1 or 2 bids on every job. MET's having the same problem. One of is that their projects are so large, there's very few contractors that can actually handle that scope of work, which I understand and have not fought as far as the PLA on the $25 to $150 million projects because of the qualifications of a contractor to do that size of a project just on the bonding requirements is immense. The experience and the knowledge to do big projects. However, on small projects like putting new fences around flow control buildings, things that are under $10 million that are one-offs that have nothing to do with running water, in my view, should be put out to the private sector as well as the union sector. And without a PLA, to try to encourage more bidders to come forward. A case in example is that MET did 6 5,000 square foot metal buildings in the desert. The metal buildings, if you watch your TV ads, you can get a 5,000 square foot metal building for under $100,000. MET's paying about $3 million a building. And the reason they're paying that is they have a PLA, which discourages most anybody in the private market. I mean, there are a few that will dip their toe in the water, but they're not going to, it's really restrictive. They ended up with J.F. Shea building metal buildings, and J.F. Shea's an underground utility contract. And the 3 bids they got were all underground utility contractors, not one vertical contract that did the job. And so they paid $20 million for 30,000 square foot of tin buildings. So which I fought and griped about incessantly, and I still am griping about that up there at Met. That's what the PLA basically does. It scares away the private contractors. And these one-offs, like metal buildings, should be put out to the private sector. There are 10,000 contractors out there who'd be happy to build those metal buildings. And metal building doesn't care whether it's in the desert or the city or the farm ground. It's a metal building. They come in on a truck and they take them off and they erect them. Granted, there are some costs to being in the desert. It's different. You've got more labor, concrete's more money because it's got to come from farther. There are factors, but not $800 a square foot factor. So that's what PLAs do, and I've been arguing that we need to take these one-offs and these odd projects and take them out of the PLA to save money for the ratepayers, because they will.
To your point, that water authority board meeting where you guys voted on the PLA, there were 5 votes that went each time, and a majority of the agencies voted one way in San Diego and one other, and so.
It was stark.
So
Yeah, it took 5 votes to get
And we
something
missed
through.
We missed it by passing it by about 4%.
Yes.
So sort of the feedback, I guess, from the committee is just that maybe an example and look at that imbalance, I think, right? Is what we're
So
seeing.
the governance still is going to be an issue until we get into that. And the act created 55% over the last blow up back in the 90s and early 2000s. They created the 55% threshold to try to get to the point where the city just didn't need one agency to control it.
Yes.
And luckily, in all the years I've been on the water authority, the city really hasn't flexed this muscle and completely jammed anything down somebody's throat. They've been kind of, they could be worse.
Regional conveyance, that was another one.
Yeah.
Majority of the agencies voted no on regional conveyance, and it came down
The
to one,
regional conveyance is a mathematical.
But the vote,
the vote.
we're talking about times that the
But the
vote.
project itself was basic math on how do you make this work.
Concur.
But anyhow, I don't know how you can solve the governance problem with that.
What do you think about the idea of keeping the voted, but then also adding a majority of the agencies also have to vote? Like, it has to be a 2-part test on the voting.
I probably wouldn't be against that. I'm in the same boat that Jack was in and that Mark's in. The city controls everything. So, I'm obviously, for my agency in North County, want to have more power to my vote mean more and not get railroaded or run over by the city. I mean, that's a general consensus. If they talked about splitting the area up into 3 areas and trying to be able to negate some of that by creating a North County voting block and South County and East County voting block as well as the city, but we still have to go by the city.
Yes. Mr. Lau and then Mr. Roback, or are you pointing? No. Okay.
Yeah, just another thought too, I agree with that one, that's one alternative. The other alternative perhaps is just follow the same framework instead of being a 55% threshold. Perhaps it's something a little higher, like a 67% threshold.
6, 7.
Down to 2, for example. I mean,
After the Senate.
A higher percentage. Okay.
it's an alternative.
Yes, there are many different alternatives to make it fair and more forward
The
looking.
one thing with that though is all your other agencies only add up to 56%. So if you have that threshold, all the city has to do is say no, and everybody else can overrule because we can't get the 67%.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point, if that's not kind of one that works. Mr. Roback, well, maybe we'll conclude with you before we go up to potable reuse coordination.
All right, so for some clarity's sake, so clearly the water authority hasn't been able to fix this problem, but as we discussed, the city is not interested in changing it. So I was hearing discussion here on the methodology in 5 years. So we can make a recommendation to do something and we give them 5 years to make that change, or we could somehow open up this act. And how does this work to actually change it?
In order to open up the Water Authority Act, you need legislation.
And do you think you're going to pass legislation without the support of City of San Diego?
But which is why.
So this is a fruitless discussion?
No, I'm gonna offer, there was a MSR several years ago of a local agency, and LAFCO made some recommendations. I think a couple of you were, Paul, you were here for that. And they said, we're actually gonna accelerate your MSR, and we're gonna review you in 2 years. You have 2 years to make these changes on governance. And that agency did, and then when they came back with the MSR 2 years later, and so LAFCO does have teeth in that, right? You can give an entity a certain amount of time to address it, and then they can take other actions thereafter.
We just talked about that, it's still not in the city's interest.
Well, but we can't solve the politics, right?
Right.
So all we
No,
can
I'm
do.
just trying to be practical
Yeah,
about this.
so our answer.
We can just try our best, and if it doesn't go anywhere, it's just,
I think.
It is what it is.
So to that point, legislatures are already paying attention to this process. The governor's office is paying attention to this MSR.
for this MSR.
Yes, the discussion you're seeing at the City of San Diego Council suggests they are not necessarily on board with the status quo. I think the rate impacts are a opportunity to reset some visioning. I think the document Priscilla and team is working on right now is oriented as an informational item. The commission and or other legislative actors may decide it should be an action item. Your input is helping us, and the conversation already is very helpful in raising these topics. Again, we're walking into this as an informational item, and the idea that, hey, give the water authority some time to absorb this. You know, I'll put my hand out there and say, I think Dan Denham's doing a great job relative to certainly his successor or predecessor, excuse me. So staff is going in with that orientation, but it's not fair to suggest this is going to remain an information item. It is very possible, whether it's the commission or outside parties, this becomes an action item.
And, you know, I think stepping back, just to get to this place where there's an independent evaluation, given where we were maybe a few years ago, is pretty substantial, right? I mean, so I understand frustration, you want it fixed sooner rather than later, but this is a pretty avid document, sort of taking an independent look at, it's gonna have eyes on it is.
Well, you've already fixed your agencies.
Well, I have, but I remember, that wasn't an easy fix. And, you know, to me, this is a good, you know, outcome from what's left is everyone's taking a look at it.
Right, and I certainly hope there is action on it. I do think.
Thank you for those comforting words.
Good luck.
Did you, before we move on to potable
Yeah,
use,
just
one more comment?
listening to the discussion, we're not part of the water authority. I'm not intimately familiar with how the voting percentages are developed, but we are a member of another JPA where these aren't issues, and just thinking aloud and thinking what a recommendation might look like, and kind of having an outside perspective on the politics of the city. Maybe there's a way, I'm not sure if that historical cost curve is goes way back, but maybe shortening that maybe to a 2 to 3 year weighted, kind of like Encina does with how they allocate their operational costs, waiting the last year the most, and then that may be more palatable to the city, because as they move on to their pure water, they'll still have some power for a little bit, but they'll phase down and over time equity would develop. So just you know, a thought from the peanut gallery out here. So
Excellent point, because the voting structure goes back to contributions since the beginning of time as the water authority, at the water authority. So shortening that might also be another solution. All right. With that, we're going to go on to potable reuse coordination, local water development versus wholesale water procurement, and maybe better to sync the two. I mean, off the top of my head, I'm going to tell you that every water agency has an urban water management plan, and all of our local supplies are either shown as planned, conceptual, or verified. We do coordinate those with the county water authority. They take our projects and incorporate them. Local supply is more reliable than imported, right? Imported depends on what's happening on the Colorado or the state water project, but yet our pure water, our recycled water projects, the desal plant are consistently more reliable and local. An idea on coordination, it would be really nice if the county water authority could, all of these local supply projects that are being developed, somehow count those for their exchanges and maybe say, hey, the equivalent of this local supply development is available, coordinate with those agencies to leave it on the Colorado River, right? Do the exchange on the Colorado River, not just for the water authority's own supplies, but also its member agency supplies, which I think would help with the exceeding their take exceeding the take or pay or going lower than the take or pay contracts. That would be a suggestion. Jack?
Yeah, I was just gonna, following up on that, I think what you're seeing here isn't lack of coordination in the past, it was getting things wrong. Right, so it looks like today that, look, you guys didn't have a plan. City was doing their thing, water authority was doing their thing, and there was no plan. The reality is the plan was just way off. Right, and I think from the water authority side, there was a reluctance to accept reality for a period of time until you see now where they've gone, uh-oh, we've got to deal with it and we've got to get rid of this water. But if you go back, 5 years, there's Kim and I were putting out things 5 years ago that said, you need to be the broker of, get rid of your water. You got more water coming online. So I think structurally from reorganization, you don't necessarily have to reorganize, and that would be difficult because no one's going to want to take on, the agencies that have made expensive investments, more expensive investments because of limitations that, pure water type investments, they had reasons for those, but other agencies aren't going to want to be tied to those. So it's sort of trying to reorganize in a way where everyone's tied to these things, where some have really cheap supplies like Lakeside, who's on groundwater. They're not going to want to be tied to anyone else, right? So I think it's more of an agreement, and I think you're seeing it more now with the water authority recognizing we have this supply with the QSA that can do what Kim was talking about. And so as these other supplies come on, phase 2, for example, we have the opportunity to use that to leverage. So I think it's more of an agreement, working together, not necessarily structurally trying to reorganize anything. But I think that's one within this 5 years of saying, hey, water authority, you've got to adjust now. You're trying, but you've really got to get on board. And if you don't, then there's a problem.
So you're saying an agreement that the county water authority reaches with other entities outside of the county to leverage that water?
You know how they did the exchanges that you mentioned earlier, where they left their equivalent on the Colorado River?
Right.
It would be those type of agreements, but saying, hey, it's not just the desal water that we have available, it's also the equivalent of these pure water supply projects to leave on, and that they enter an agreement with San Diego or Padre or those entities, and because that's a significant amount of water. You add all of those pure water projects plus the desal, that is an amount of water that can be exchanged, and we all know what's coming on 2026 on the Colorado River. It is oversubscribed, and we do need to find ways, and that's another whole issue, but it's a way to help it.
Yeah, and you're seeing this argument in the media about phase 2 San Diego, but phase 2 is at 10 years is probably optimistic. It's 15 years away. You probably say if they decided today. Well, that's a long time to be able to make adjustments with these other supply commitments. And so I think, to me, that's really the focus should be on making that adjustment through agreements. If not through agreements, then there might be something that would structurally need to happen. But I think they're moving that way. In the QSA with the Met settlement, they can leave that water with Met now essentially at a wash, right? So they've got that structure already in place essentially with the QSA.
Marty?
Yeah, on that vein, I don't know if this is a particular time to talk about it, but Met has agreed with San Diego to move 50,000 acre feet of water. to any agency within the Met sphere of influence. What Dan is trying to do now well, let me just take a step back. Right now, we have no vehicle to trade water outside of our area. We can't go to Arizona and Nevada and sell them our water right now. However, there is indications that the federal government would allow that. The roadblock has been met. The roadblock at Met has been the lawsuit. That's been settled, and that has cemented the cost of transportation of QSA water to a set increase every year, irrespective of what Met wants to do. That doesn't mean Met can't change the playing field, but for transportation costs, that is set at roughly 4% a year increase. And what that relates to is in the past, if Met decided to raise their rates 10%, the transportation fee went up 10%. Met is proposing significant rate increases over the next decade. So that agreement kind of settles down that constant change and uncertainty in the transportation rate. The IID water is set as an increase of approximately 3% a year. So between the two, you're looking at a 4 to 4.5% increase each year. Net is proposing a 12% increase next year in the next biennium, right out of the gate. So by getting this settlement, we actually have a benefit of not being so reactive to Met's rates in that aspect. Dan has been working with the government and with Met to try to get this barrier dropped so that we can move our desal water to other states who are like in Phoenix, where they have moratoriums on building because they have to find water. $4,000 water may be reasonable in Arizona because they don't, when you don't have it, it becomes money all of a sudden disappears, as we saw in 2019 to 2022 when San Diego was the darling of the water industry, because it wasn't talking about costs, it's talking about having. Well, now we've got an abundance of water, so now everybody's concerned about costs because we got plenty of cheap water. That's just kind of the fickle game that we're in. But if Met approves, the federal government will approve interstate transfers. And that opens up an opportunity for us because we are one of the only agencies that have a direct line to the Colorado River. And lo and behold, that's where Arizona and Nevada are. We can actually sell our 50,000 acre foot of desal water through the Colorado River exchange with Arizona. And so we're cautiously optimistic that's going to happen. And it could happen by the end of the year, and that's going to take a lot of pressure off our rates because we can move the expensive water. When we talk about recycled water projects, the city of San Diego had an article published in City Watch that said the city of water cost, and Matt Vespi clarified that the city's pure water is a sewage project. He said that in open session at the Water Authority, that it's not a water project, it's a sewage project. The City Watch said in their article that the cost of the water from pure water is in excess of $3,500 an acre foot. So the city's basically solving the sewage problem and helping their water issue, and they can make that number whatever they want to be for water costs. But for us as lay people, that's $3,500 an acre foot to produce pure water on a project that was started a decade ago. The Met's pure water, Southern California, is $5,200 an acre foot and that is a project that is going to start now and move forward. So this Pure Water San Diego is an old project coming to fruition using old numbers. The new number is now $5,000 an acre foot. So when we talk about putting new plants and new recycle plants into desal, we have to use that number as a starting point because it's only going to go up. Historically, back in the first decade of 2000, Metropolitan was moving just under 2 million acre feet of water. They're now moving 1.2 million acre feet of water. And the first decade, were not getting enough water from the Delta and the Colorado River to provide for future needs. And so they went into the LRP mode and started financing these projects for everybody, because they had a hole they had to fill, because they couldn't get more water off the Delta and they couldn't get more water off the Colorado, so they needed these projects. And they have funded these projects very successfully, but right now, 1/3 of the LRP projects that they funded are underperforming. Not because they're bad projects, it's because you've got $1,000 water out there. Why would you pay $4,000 an acre foot by running your own plant? So about 1/3 of the plants are running at bare minimum to keep them operational and up to speed. And yet here Met is talking about building a new $11 billion pure water project when they finance projects that are underperforming. So I have asked for an assessment of those projects that before we move forward with the big expensive pure water project in LA, to make sure those facilities are functioning like they're intended, because that may fill the hole that we keep seeing that we need to fund. But going back to the San Diego's issue, if that agreement is lifted, or that rule is lifted, we may see a significant option here for our water rates to be able to move that expensive water.
You don't know the value of water to the well runs dry, right?
Well, another example, that's something I thought, they made an agreement of Met for a couple of agencies in the Yuba City area to provide water, and the cost, the good cost was $2,000 an acre foot. The bad cost was $4,000 an acre foot. And it came at a retainer of $500,000, which I argued against because it was only a 2-year agreement. And I said, you're predicting a drought in 2 years. We can't predict this. We can't predict that. And one of the Las Virgenes, the state water department area people, the director said, we don't care what it costs. If we don't have water, we'll pay whatever we have. And that is the fickleness of the world we're in, is water is life, and you'll pay whatever you have to if you don't have it. And so we're only one drought away from being back to San Diego being the darling of the industry.
San Diego's always the darling of the industry. We just have to financially. Can we move to item 3 on defining service adequacy?
Can I add one quick
Okay.
thing? Just on that last front, you know, from a regional perspective, because this MSR is the water authority of Met, is the interesting thing we're talking about is Met talking about we need more supply. And now San Diego's talking about, well, we have too much supply, but we might sell that out of state. And if you think about that discussion, it doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Because if you're saying regionally, we don't have enough supply potentially, so we're gonna spend a lot on a new supply. But then within your region, you've got an area saying, wait a second, we have too much supply and we need to get it gone, but we're gonna get it not the closest place, we're gonna get it out of state. And that is a sort of governance cost structure thing that maybe has to figure out, why is that happening within this context? Because it doesn't make a lot of sense.
What doesn't make, our delegation is not on board with this, but Met is still trying to come up with a need to fill a hole that it doesn't have.
Camp 4, option B.
That's all I'm saying, is so that sort of, with not just portable reuse coordination, but in that bullet is really water supply coordination within the region you're looking at, which is both Met and the water authority. How did we end up in this situation where that isn't coming together?
Mr. Romack.
So, Marty, what you were saying was, you know, and it's true, you know, if you don't have water, you eventually you pay whatever you need to get it. But I think to be realistic too, you know, I don't know if a lot of people know this, the lowest water rates in the country, Phoenix, they're very low. So I think it's a pipe dream to think we're going to sell $4,000 an acre foot to people that are paying a lot less than that. So I think it's a matter of cutting our losses, just be clear about that. In terms of phase 2 of Pure Water San Diego, I've been on the Metro JPA for over 20 years now. So that Metro JPA is 12 agencies that pay 1/3 of the cost of the sewer treatment at Port Loma. And you know, San Diego is not talking about not doing phase 2 of Pure Water. Just so we're clear on that. The CFO of San Diego, until I think the end of this month, Matt Westby, who sits next to me on the water authority, says we're doing phase 2. So, and the reason what they're doing it is they have an agreement with the environmentalists not to upgrade Point Loma to secondary treatment, which is, I think at this point, between $5 and $10 billion. So, so for the purposes of this discussion here, yes, we need better coordination with all the water agencies on reuse projects, on, whatever, I think, aren't you guys looking at doing some more groundwater? I think even at this point, right?
No, south.
Oh, south. Okay. So not clear. But yeah, there needs to be better coordination.
Thank you. Item 3, defining service adequacy. Secure supply versus financial sustainability. Interesting, been around, I'm starting my 30th year. I remember when County Water Authority water was $364 an acre foot, and we all sat in a room, and it was Paul Lansbury, who was the AGM of Water Authority at the time, said, at what price reliability, right? All of these projects, at what price? And the decision back then was paying for the reliability was the right direction to go. And at that moment in time, it was the right direction. That was looking at all of these cutbacks that had happened. San Diego was looking at, cutbacks in supply. Now they're at the point where the supply is secure, but the financial sustainability is in question. It's almost like it flipped from over the last few years. But I will say, as a member agency of the County Water Authority, none of us exist without them. So the service adequacy has to be there. The reliability has to be there. And the question is, at what price reliability is what Paul Lansbury said then. So I don't know what the answer to this is, but I do think if you solve that governance issue and you have the capability to sell some of these reliable supplies, leverage them, exchange them, that does help with the financial impacts on the member agencies. Mr. Lau and then Mr. Martinez.
And I do agree with your statement there, Kim. I think the question, at least in my mind, when you define adequacy, I think it's a bit eyes open, right?
Yes.
It's a big wide range what adequacy could be. And ultimately, when we talk about level of service, and I think this is why within the realm of the water board potentially is that if you look at providing the service, perhaps when you talk about adequacy, you didn't need to define prohibition, but figure out what the core service we want to do and organize operation accordingly, right? Not more than what you need to do necessarily, just because it's nice to do.
Very valid point, Mr. Martinez and Mr. Mellis.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, exactly what I was thinking, and I've been thinking for a while. Sometimes I feel it's unfair to accuse the County Water Authority of not doing a good job because they're in debt, but they went in debt because of us, right? We demanded reliability, and some of us kind of went the extra mile and built plants like these to have more reliability. And I'll just say, well, no, thank you. We don't want to pay the debt, find somebody else to pay it. I think it's a little bit unfair, realistically, even though it costs us, right? It's going to cost us to have that reliability. And to the other side of the equation, the financial sustainability. And I think a lot of us are probably thinking, because I hear it, we're probably thinking the same way. Dan and the County Water, they need to get rid of that expensive water. They need to find a good buyer. We need to, in the governance part of things, we need to give them the ability to sell it to the highest bidder, and it needs to happen soon because it's not being needed right now. So they do need to have that flexibility. And I think this group needs to cooperate and help push that effort,
Great point. Thank you. Mr. Miller, and then we'll move on to encouraging
So I
science.
appreciate what you said there. The idea of moving water within the region is a relatively new concept. In reality, not a new concept that people never thought about it before. There's so many restrictions to doing it that this hurdle is now, step one has happened. We can move water through the Met area. So we could sell desal water to Molten Miguel, and they've already made inquiries about, they want reliable water, and they're willing to take a piece of that, pay us a fair price. I'm not gonna say they're gonna pay us $4,000 an acre foot, but they're gonna pay more than $1,600 an acre foot. So those steps are being taken. So if we can, and the Met board realizes that is something we need to be thinking, not from our bunkers, but in the entire Southwest, because the entire Southwest is in a water stress. Colorado River's under stress, and the Delta is under stress for more factors than just rain. But the reliability factor that Kim was just talking about is debated and met all the time. 100% reliability 100% of the time. What are you willing to pay for to have 100% reliability 100% of the time? Are you okay with not getting water on Wednesday and Saturday? Because then we can go to 80% reliability 80% of the time. And then we won't have to fix those pipelines. We won't have to spend that money. We don't have to raise your rates. Are you willing to have water 5 days a week instead of 7? And I have a feeling the answer is no. I have a cabin in Idaho. Our water goes out occasionally, and we're in panic mode. Water goes out, you can't flush your toilets, you can't do anything. And all of a sudden you're running around with a chicken with a head cut off trying to fill bathtubs and stuff to get water so that you can at least flush your toilets. So we have lived in a society where you can turn the tap on and water comes out every minute of the day, 24/7, 365 days out of the year. And we have that luxury when you think of the third world countries that are bringing water in buckets and on trucks just to get water to cook with. So we're kind of spoiled in that way, but the big question is 100% reliability. Do you want it? And that's where we are. And with this aging infrastructure, we're going into the phases like the East Coast is, where they've got 200-year systems. Our systems, Vista's got a flume that's over 100 years old that has to be replaced. Do you think I want to go to my ratepayers and say we're going to spend $400 million on replacing a pipe that's not bringing us new water? It's just bringing us the same old water. So we're all under that pressure right now of the aging system.
I was just going to add real quick. So part of the thing here is when the original plan came out, it was to diversify from that, not to get 100% off that, right? And so then ultimately demands were so much lower that you're now almost 100% on that. And the question does that make sense, right? Under what situation does that make sense? And so I think one of it, looking at supply reliability, is also recognizing in a drought, no matter how much water you have, you are still going to be asked to cut back outdoor irrigation and other stuff. And so for the water authority, the real question is how much non-med water do you need? In a med allocation of 50%, if you have to take a 10% cutback, that's probably good. You have storage also, so you can pull water out of storage. So to me, that's one of the big things that has to be looked at is how much water is really available? Is it 50,000 acre feet? Is it 100,000 acre feet? Is it 150,000 acre feet? And so I think that's part of this, financial sustainability is also with how much real water is there available under these situations and what is the right amount to have.
Mr. Roback, and then we're going on to encouraging signs.
So, I guess gotta say this morning, I don't think we're talking about cutting back to, water every other day or something. We're not talking about going to a third world country. That's not, we need water safely, reliably, lowest possible cost. That's what our customers want. That's what we need to do. You look back on the history, your example of the $800 a square foot metal buildings that cost $50 a square foot, that you just multiply that over 30 years of shitty planning, uber expensive desalinated water that we knew at the get-go. We built the largest membrane treatment plant in the world in San Marcos, and now they're talking about decommissioning. You've got metropolitan watershed plants running at 25% of capacity. we've been bad stewards of the public's money. That's the bottom line. So we're not talking about cutting back to, water every other day. So we need to right this ship and get us back on a firm financial footing.
I'm gonna respectfully disagree with you that it was shitty planning and bad stewards. Back when these facilities were planned and built, demands were double what they are today. And so it's easy to look back and say, hey, it was done wrong. But in that point in time, I don't think there were dissenters on the IID agreement. There weren't dissenters that, hey, we need to look at local reliability.
We're dissenters.
No, yeah. I mean, most people thought it was gonna keep going. There weren't a lot of voices saying demands are gonna drop.
10 years ago, when we started seeing them drop, that's when we all started talking up. But at that point, they're already built.
Hindsight's 20/20. I get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I'm just to Jack's point, I do agree with him. It's that, and yes, the demand was really high before, but I think from a planning perspective, I think in the past, even with this planning in place, with this demand in place, I think there's a sentiment within the water authority they want to be independent from that. That drove a lot of the decision that we have today, right? And therefore, I think let's resolve that sentiment. We have oversupply, right? Because you're seeking that independence.
Yes.
If you weren't seeking that independence, I think your supply planning probably would have worked.
Moving on to encouraging signs, I think the fact that we are having this discussion openly, transparently is an encouraging sign. A lot of us have been talking about this for 10 years, and I think we were called heretics, right? But now the fact Dan has done the settlement agreement, that they are openly discussing that LAFCO is actually taking a look at the water authority. I think all of that is encouraging. We're having, to Mark's point, we're looking at the issue at hand and trying to fix it. So I would offer that I do absolutely agree with your points on the encouraging signs.
And LAFCO didn't get a hate letter from their general counsel, so that's a big step in the right direction.
We don't know if they'll be touched.
You don't,
So don't use you as a blueprint.
Can I just make one comment as
Yes,
you wrap this up? So Priscilla is doing a great job getting this, and as you said, later this month, I think Dan and company will be getting their version of the internal complete draft. What we didn't talk about today, but just as a bit of a trailer, is Priscilla and team is also working at the same time with our review of MET, right? Now, the review of MET is focused more on the relationship in San Diego, but when we come back at a future meeting, we'll certainly present that to you as well. And there is this interesting discussion from their perspective, stakeholders in MET, about, just as there's been this, discussion about the decision-making at the water authority and all these, impacts about local diversification of supply and what that means to water authority. MET is having this other view of the world saying, well, geez, water authority, your decision starting in the 90s kind of created a bit of a headache for us, and they're feeling it. And so that's the discussion, I think, as a teaser, we're going to bring to this group, and how much this group wants to weigh in on the effects of San Diego County Water Authority from the perspective of MET.
Concur, and there's a lot of history there on MET building the Twin Oaks plant and its effects on MET's treatment plant, and 100%. I'm looking forward to that. Mr. Kent?
Chair Thornton, really quickly, I just wanted to put something on the record. Many people have asked me about this. I have not been working on this MSR in my role as a consultant, and so anybody who thinks that I have been working on this in the background, it's not the case. Just want to put that on the record for those folks in the Water Authority who are watching, and
Oh, wow, okay.
Hey, we're talking about transparency.
Well, anyone else want to say something?
All right, let's go with Jack.
I was just gonna say, the last NAT, I've been through a fair amount of this with Tom, and I do think that, the direction is much more positive and open, and, I think there will be value to this document in terms of providing some thoughts, which will probably help them do what they need to do. So it's not where it was combative and, you know, anything he said would just get attacked with sort of propaganda. I think this actually will have, you know, value in this time. It may not get stuff done as fast as, say, you know, Mark wants it to get done. But
No, the ratepayers, so.
I understand,
Okay.
but, you know, I think it is valuable and timely. It looks like they're kind of hitting the key items, at least from my perspective.
Thank you all for the hearty discussion. Thank you, Priscilla, for a great job getting us here. We look forward to seeing this. My apologies to my fire friends that you all have to sit in the.
We just hear that water comes out of the pipe.
Okay, there we go. All right.
At what price?
At what price?
I want
This
whatever you
is
guys
great.
want to pay.
By the way, I want recycled water fire hydrants. Shit, I want that. Put that in your, yeah.
We do have a
Debit cards.
recycled fire hydrant at the San Jose.
We also cut around, we use helicopters, dip into lakes,
They do.
pull it out. So, yeah,
No way.
that's already around.
Thank you all for hearty discussion on this item. We are now on to agenda item 5C? Yes, 5C, which is an update on the Sustainable Agricultural Land Conservation Grant, SALC 2.0. And Michaela, are you doing this item? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Thorner, and good morning, committee members, Michaela Peters, Reynolds, too, for the record. So this item before you is an update on the San Diego LAFCO's activities in carrying out the SALC grant, or the Sustainable Agricultural Lands Conservation Grant. We also refer to this grant as SALC 2.0. And this one is in partnership with the County of San Diego Planning and Development Services. And then as a reminder, the SALC program was created in 2014 as a component of the California Strategic Growth Council and is administered by the California Department of Conservation. So the SALC program is funded through cap and trade revenues and supports the securement of conservation easements on agricultural land at high risk of conversion to non-agricultural uses. And then they also support planning grants to improve regional response to high loss of agricultural land. So from 2021 to 2023, San Diego LAFCO carried out its first SALC planning grant in partnership with the RCD of Greater San Diego to identify, monitor, and assess the ownership of active agricultural lands within San Diego County and determine effective methods to strengthen agricultural production regionally. So one of the recommendations from this study was to inform small farming opportunities through an analysis of costs and benefits of small farms, which led San Diego LAFCO to apply with the County of San Diego for the second 2-year SALC planning grant. And then that first final planning grant or final report from the first planning grant is in front of you if you'd like to take a look at that. So that brings us to SALC 2.0. And on the screen are the 6 main tasks and deliverables, which include overall grant management, a market and gap analysis report, and then the gap analysis also includes an interactive tool called the Agricultural Profitability Assessment Tool, or AGPAT, which I will talk about briefly in a little bit. Continual outreach and education throughout the grant, a strategic plan carried out by the county and LAFCO, which we are currently working on. And then lastly, a final report to serve as the culmination of all of our findings and feedback received through outreach efforts and to be presented to the LAFCO Commission as well as the County Board of Supervisors next spring. So the market analysis has been completed and entails an analysis of the major operating expenses and levels of profitability of San Diego County farms with a focus on small farms, so that being 10 acres or less. And this economic analysis completed by our consultant agricultural impact associates provides stakeholders and policymakers with concrete data that allows us to move from generalizations to specific knowledge on the state of farming in the region. And some of those generalizations are on the screen. One being before SALC 2.0, there was the generalization that San Diego County agriculture faces serious challenges. And what we explored in our market analysis was that San Diego County is losing an average of 18 acres of farmland each day, and 1 farm every 3.5 days. Another one was that farming doesn't seem like a very profitable venture. And what we found was that San Diego County farms had an average operating profit margin of 13% in 2022, roughly half the 25% threshold that experts recommend for financial health. So in the gap analysis examines operating expenses and profitability specific to 4 crops, so avocados, lemons, tomatoes, and strawberries. Based on Schedule F data provided by San Diego County farmers and the USDA census data. So an example of what we explored in the gap analysis was something like, given the operating costs, what price per pound would be required to break even on operating costs? And these questions led to the development of the agricultural profitability assessment tool, which is shown on the screen. You can see that, which can be used to calculate the profitability of both an individual farm's production as well as at the countywide profitability of a particular crop. And this can be found on our website if you'd like to check that out. Yeah, so the findings of the market and gap analysis combined with feedback obtained from 3 public workshops have informed our development of a strategic plan. And the strategic plan, or task 5, focuses on identifying actionable strategies and potential policy recommendations to mitigate profitability shortfalls identified in prior market and gap analyses. So in order to wrap up this task, LAFCO seeks committee input on 2 key recommendations of the draft strategic plan, and those being the idea of incorporating agricultural analysis into the municipal service review program, and then also establishing a regional working group to promote affordability of water access for farmers. So in more detail, as for what those recommendations would look like, they're on the screen. And number 1, as I mentioned, if we were to integrate an agricultural analysis into our municipal service reviews, we could highlight the economic contributions of agriculture within an agency's boundaries, including vendors and agritourism. We could map agricultural acreage within jurisdictions to highlight communities with meaningful agricultural activity for contextual analysis. And in urbanized areas, consider urban agriculture and local food systems. We could also review jurisdictional policies that support agriculture, such as water conservation, recycled water, crop swap programs, and climate smart practices, and review city general plans and specific plans for relevant land use policies related to agriculture, such as the promotion of farm worker housing. And then the second one, as I briefly mentioned earlier, would be to support the establishment of a regional working group focused on promoting affordable water access for farmers, which can include members of the County Water Authority, members of the LAFCO Commission, Cities Advisory, and of course, this committee for whoever may be interested in that. So with all this, today we're specifically looking for feedback on the outlined draft strategic plan actions listed on the screen, and then any other ideas that we did not mention. So we look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Great report. And you'll have one in front of us, yes. So can we get some feedback? We'll start with item number 1, integration of an agriculture analysis into all of our MSRs. Mr. Beebe.
Well, I just want to make sure, up in sort of the North County area, we have the crop swap program that actually ran through the money. We opened it back up. We're going to run through that. So there's sort of multiple efforts happening. It would be good to try to connect them a little bit better.
Yeah.
So what we've been focused on is trying to get a sustainable source of funding for that crop swap program. So there is one that covers a pretty good amount of North County through Escondido, Oceanside, the Fallbrook, Rainbow, Valley Center that's gone through. So that's, really the challenge we have is trying to access some sustainable funding. Metropolitan's talking about, using one of their ag programs that will potentially help with funding. Farm Bill's been a big effort. How do we get to the Farm Bill? Because that's a lot of money every year to fund it. But that framework has been, very successful with helping them. Just so I don't have to talk again, on the water side, we just had a discussion about how potable reuse projects are expensive. So there's this things stuck on Escondido, which is a unique situation because Escondido has a disposal problem. That doesn't really work anywhere else in the county. But people should remember at one point, Met had an agricultural water rate. And even though we're talking about Met not having enough water, they have too much water right now. And so that would be another effort, I think, that could provide some value. It's talking about, hey, Met, maybe it's time to think about, we have wet, wet, dry, dries. That works well for ag in some ways because they need to leach in certain years. So thinking about if you're going to get discounted water, it's not going to be by investing in new water supplies. It's just not. The answer is you're not going to get there, but it might be in structuring something that fits with farmers where in a drought, they can take that first cutback, right? They're willing to say, hey, I'm hanging by a thread. I'm willing to risk 5 years from now having to decrease production to survive for 5 years. So I think that angle as you're looking at this MSR or water authority, water supplies, the ag stuff, that to me is a better place to focus that effort than trying to mirror Escondido and other communities.
Mr. Miller?
Who are you talking to at Met about that?
They're here. So they're talking about, there's this subcommittee, right? The ag and
They just created a subcommittee.
tribal subcommittee. So I was on that call. So they're talking about essentially using the existing ag program to try to fund essentially a crop swap-ish, though it's Met, so it's a little more complicated than the current crop swap type of thing, which is what we're working on. But that's where they're headed, is sort of a turf replacement for ag.
Well, we have a San Diego rep that will be on that committee, so I will talk to them. It's either gonna be Lois or Dan, so I'll talk to them.
Yeah.
My feedback on item 1, I would support agricultural analysis and MSRs. I know who all my farmers in Levenheim are. We have to certify them in order to get the water authority special ag rate. We have our own special agricultural water rate at Levenheim on top of the water authorities. We back out fire flow in order to give an additional discount. So I do know all your water agencies know who their farmers are and their accounts are designated as such. So I think actually doing that mapping would be easy. And I'll tell you, like agritourism, I have Chino farms in my area. Restaurants come from across the country to get Chino's produce. And so I do believe that looking at agritourism in MSRs would be valid as well. Anyone else have comments on that? Yes, sir.
I understand the benefit of cited here for incorporating agricultural analysis and MSRs for water districts and cities and stuff for tourism. What would you say the benefit in a fire district's MSR would be, or is there?
You guys are good.
Yes.
You use those.
Senior kitchens. Yeah, I think for that example, we would probably just say something in the MSR that it's not relevant to that, but I
mean, the
like
property
for
taxes
to
relevant
see
to our
if there's-
budget. I have a big farm in our district, but that's about it.
Yeah, a lot of water capacity that's not really needed in a fire generally, because they don't have a bunch of residential stuff. So, you know, that's how we do our ag rebate too a little bit, because you're saying, you know, they don't necessarily need all the same fire capacity.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be really useful to have like the things done that are suggested in A and B. Be helpful to have a better global understanding in the county, but I think it'd be helpful for associated efforts too, to like for promoting agriculture and supporting farmers by being able to really show, demonstrate, quantify all of this. Yeah, I totally agree, and definitely support point 2 as well. I know that's one of the biggest challenges for a farmer, so advocating for that.
Thank you.
The only thing I'm going to know that you may run into some resistance, you know, there is the regional board out chasing people down irrigated land stuff. So sometimes some of our farmers aren't super excited about showing up on maps. So depending on what regions you're looking in, there is some reluctance to highlight it.
And I guess it
Yep.
it could be like maybe not necessarily calling out specific like producers, but just like keeping it some
pretty vague.
Yeah.
And if you do have a regional work group, I know the water authority is looking at their agricultural rate and their are Prop 26 requirements. You cannot subsidize one water customer with the revenues from another without this reasonable nexus cost of service analysis. Do they have a reduced benefit? But also local agencies, retail agencies, we have Prop 218 concerns as well, and we do have to do cost of service and justify the rate. So I would recommend having not only wholesale, but also retail agencies on that work group, because there are different considerations at each level. Okay. Any other comments on this, suggestions? It sounds like we're a yes on both. Okay, lots of nods. Thank you very much for that present. We are gonna hold off and say to the end, 5D, and we're gonna go to the court. Yay? Yes, I got a text from Keith. And we're gonna move to 5E, the Unified Court District and related, and Tracy, you're gonna talk to us all about the court.
Thank you, Chair Golden. Good morning, committee members. My name is Tracy Largent. I'm the CFO for the Port of San Diego. My background is in municipal finance and government software, and as some of you may know, I came to the port from a water district. And one of the saddest things about leaving the water district was not being a part of the special districts community anymore. So one of the first things I did was join
Not like to say
CSDA.
which water district you came from.
Don't say it.
Everybody knows
You
I
sounded
was with
ashamed.
I came from Rainbow, so. And so I'm really happy to be part of the committee. So thank you for having me. And with that, I will. Are you gonna do the? So I'm going to give a little background on the port. So the Port of San Diego was created by the California state legislation in 1962. We're governed by the Tidelands Trust Doctrine and the Port Act. And this act describes and directs the port to manage the bay and tidelands on behalf of the citizens of the entire state of California. And we need to manage that and promote commerce, navigation, recreation, and fisheries while balancing those uses of the areas with also being an environmental steward. So one thing that's interesting is we collect no taxes, so we operate entirely on our operations from maritime and then our ground hold leases. And then we're governed by a 7-member board from our 5-member agencies. So we have 3 from the city of San Diego, and then 1 each from our member agencies of Chula, Vista, Imperial Beach, Coronado, and National City. So this is a look at our jurisdiction. We have 34 miles of waterfront out of a total of about 70. Most of the rest is governed by the Navy, federal government, and then some of the cities have some jurisdiction as well. Right, so our economic impact. We have a statewide impact of about $26 billion, and in San Diego County alone, about $14 billion. On the jobs front, we support about 71,000 jobs in the county. And here, how can we kind of break out our operations? So we've got maritime, waterfront development, public safety, so we have Harbor Police Department, experiences, and environment. So I'll go into each of these just a little bit. First one is maritime. So we're port, so we have both cargo terminals and cruise terminals, and we run the 4th largest of 11 California ports. We're also a strategic port, so the port's one of 18 strategic ports in the US, so we have to be ready to support the military, usually in 48 hours notice for either load in or load off operations. So we clear our entire terminal for that. So we have 2 cargo terminals. We've got 10th Avenue Marine Terminal and then the National City Marine Terminal. And interesting fact, the port imports nearly 4 billion bananas each year, so that accounts for almost every banana west of the Rockies. And then we approximately 1 in 8 vehicles in the U.S. are imported through San Diego because we have a really big roll-on, roll-off facility where it's kind of interesting to watch. They just have like hundreds of Porsches and Tacomas and Jeeps like flying off the boat. It's really interesting to watch them unload them. This is a quick look at our cruise ship activity. We're going to see 21 new home ports from Norwegian Cruise in this cruise season, which is quite a big jump. And then 45 new home ports with the Royal Caribbean the following season. And when they home port out of San Diego, we see a lot more local economic impact from that. So those two increases will add another 158 million in this fiscal year to San Diego County. Okay, now we'll look at waterfront development. The port has a really diverse real estate portfolio. We have approximately 800 tenants, so those are range from hotels and restaurants, so there are ground leases, and then also shipbuilding, repair facilities, and marinas. This is a really exciting project. We just opened the Gaylord Pacific in Chula Vista. We did this as a JICA with the city of Chula Vista. It's a really large resort. It's a $1.3 billion project on the bayfront. It's also got a 39-acre park, which is Sweetwater Park, which is going to be doubling the size of the existing park that's there. And then we're also building Harbor Park in front of it along the water. So that should be finished this next year. So this resort's 22 stories, offers 1,600 guest rooms, over 10 restaurants and bars, and 4.25-acre water park with a lazy river. The sports bar has the biggest TV I've ever seen, and it's really great. But one really cool thing we did with this project is, you know, it's in an area where not everybody can afford to stay there. And so we had them offers as part of the agreement. Every day there's 150 day passes that are sold for $12.50. So the local residents can come in and use the facility. And I thought that was a really great thing that they did for that. So it's really changing the waterfront down there. This next project we're working on is Freedom Park at Navy Pier. It's a partnership with the USS Midway Museum. So when completed, it'll be the largest park dedicated to veterans on the West Coast. It's going to be on the western edge of Navy Pier next to the Midway, and then we'll wrap around the east edge to G Street and continue to Bob Hope Memorial. So the port's committed $12 million to the construction efforts to complete the park, and we're continuing to work with the Midway on their efforts to raise funds for it. It's going to be beautiful. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Before it was just parking, and then there was a big head house at the beginning of it that blocked the view. So now it's really going to open it up for the public to use. Another one we get asked about a lot is the Top Golf facility on East Harbor Island. Let's skip ahead. Okay, so we're working on this project right now. It's got rental cars there. We're looking at adding the Top Golf and more entertainment and dining options there, and then just having it open it up for public space area in the parks. So we're hoping within the next year or so that'll be opened up. It's over by the airport. And then we've got the Seaport San Diego. This is on the Central Embarcadero. We're pushing for the redevelopment of this area. It's approximately 70 acres with proposed $4 billion investment. So it's going to be mixed use development that's kind of going to just reimagine the whole Seaport area. And we're working with One Highway 1. They were their food partner in 2016. And so they're going to include extensive plazas, parks, and promenades, piers, and marinas, hospitality, retail, and restaurants. It's kind of, they're gonna have an urban beach in there, and just some educational uses. Okay, next we've got experiences. So these are just different projects we have throughout the port. We have, it kind of breaks it down by the numbers. We have public piers to take in the waterfront views, public art, museums, and other attractions to explore. And then we've got RV resorts, 23 different parks, adding another one, so that'll be 24, 100 restaurants, food trucks, and a lot of things happening around the bay. We also support a number of regional events, including the Chula Vista Harbor Fest, the South Bay Holiday in National City, Big Bay Boom. Hopefully we can keep doing that. Parade of Lights, and the Holiday Bowl Parade, and many others. Then we also do Tidelands activations, where we just go to the parks. This is something we got a lot of community feedback from in our resident survey, that they wanted us to help engage some of the parks. So what they came back with feedback is they wanted to have things with multicultural festivities, performers, booths, activities for kids. So we do that at the different parks throughout the year. We have a pretty extensive art program. You can go to the port's website and actually download a PDF of a map of, you can go and visit all the different art projects, but there are vibrant murals, fountains, kinetic artworks, light projects, sound art, and just different conceptual artworks. So you can do it like a self-guided tour, which is kind of fun with the kids or with people from out of town. And then this one is my top priority right now, public safety. So we have about 150 public safety officers, and they patrol the San Diego Bay and surrounding waterfront, including the San Diego airport. So they are marine firefighters trained and ready to douse vessel fires on the bay, and they help protect us from human and drug traffickers as well as terrorists. We test our resolve. We have a lot of boats that come up from the border, because part of our jurisdiction is actually the border along Imperial Beach down to Tijuana. So we do get a lot of activity in that area. They're also trained in explosive and narcotics detection. So my biggest priority right now is to get them a new facility. So I'm working on looking at some finance structuring for that. They've been in a temporary facility for over 20 years. It's really inadequate. So that right now is, as CFO, is my top priority. Environment. So one of our we're environmental champions. The port and our tenants have spent approximately $227 million on electrification projects across the port. So some of these include, we've got the first all-electric mobile cranes in North America. We've got the first all-electric tugboat. We actually have the highest lifting capacity of any port on the West Coast. So we do a lot of break bulk, which is something that maybe doesn't fit in a container. So really large item that comes up on the ship. We're able to take those on. And then we've done a lot of with shore power for cruise ships, so that when they come in, so they're running, they plug in and helps with the air quality. All right, this is really a cool thing we do at the port. It's the Blue Economy Incubator, which was established in 2016. Basically, we invest in ocean innovation startups for companies that have a nexus to the bay. So it allows the port to assist in the creation, development, and scaling of new water-dependent business ventures in and around San Diego Bay, primarily focused on sustainable aquaculture and port-related or blue technologies. So this is a map of some of the different ones we've invested in. I think we have 12 in our portfolio now. So, you know, we're a government, so you can't take ownership in a company. So what we do is we give them, you know, a certain amount of money in exchange for revenue sharing over usually about 10 years. And it's not so much the revenue that we get back, it's the partnership with helping them develop technologies to help the environment, and then also help us with researching potential issues like our cholera outbreak that happened in the bay. It was last year down in the Coronado phase. So we had a company come in and they had unmanned boats that could, like little, kind of like a drone, but in the water, could go and survey the bottom of the ocean a lot more efficiently than the divers could, because the divers have to go down and survey basically every inch looking for this cholera algae outbreak. So that was an interesting one that we invested in. And our Blue Economy Incubator team there's only 2 or 3 people on the team, but they're the only agency in the U.S. doing anything like this, other than maybe the Department of Energy. And so they are actually speaking all over the world about this. They speak for the Economist magazine. They go to Tokyo, Valencia, Spain, and all over. So it's been very successful. It's also helped us get a lot of grants. And I'll end on our marine clean energy strategy. So this is a strategy we use to offset some of the pollution that maritime can create for our communities. And it serves as a catalyst for the investment in cleaner air. And so far, we've spent, as I said, about $227 million on this. So this is where we invest in things like upgrades to our marine terminals, such as the shore power. We built a microgrid. We're doing procurements of zero emission vehicles. So any of our equipment that we use on the terminals, like the cranes I was talking about earlier, and the tugboat. And also we're doing this in support with our partners at SANDAG and Caltrans. We're working with them on the design for Harbor Drive 2.0. So some of the funds go towards that. That was really quick. Thank you for telling you about the port, and happy to answer any questions. I'll be around after.
How's your new boss versus your old one?
That's not fair.
There's only one way to go.
He taught me to talk really fast and not take pauses.
Thank you for the presentation. I have learned a lot. There was a lot of what you provided, I just assumed was run by the cities. I didn't realize how much was in the port's purview. Don't ever get rid of the holiday bowl parade. I love the national wiener dog races. They have the championships at the holiday at the beginning of the parade. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions or comments, Mr. Rodak?
Can you go back to that slide where you show the lay of the land on the bay in terms of the properties, jurisdiction?
Everything but the Navy and the airport. Right.
So
Right, specific.
we were part of the airport until 2003 when legislation separated us. So we are still required to provide their public safety.
Okay, so and I don't know if you went over this when I was outside the room. I don't think so because it was on that map. So which of those properties do you actually own? I know you have jurisdiction over development, but which one of those, do you own all those properties that are shown in the?
So everything that's highlighted, we have jurisdiction over. So the submerged tidelands or the submerged bay, the dark blue there. And then the orange is the port's area that we have jurisdiction.
Well, like for example, where solar turbines is on Harbor Drive, you physically own that property.
It's owned by the state. We just have jurisdiction over it, kind of like a national park.
You manage
Oh,
it, yeah.
so the state owns all.
We're governed by
And you're-
state lands.
So the state owns it, and you would have governance.
And it goes up to the height, the historic high tide line, so it tends to kind of ebb and flow as you go around.
But all of the income from those properties comes to you, not the state? Of
It comes
course.
to us. And then we are governed by the Port Act and the Public Tidelands Trust Doctrine to balance it out for fisheries and recreation.
When was the port established? How long ago?
1962.
Thank you.
That was
Very-
the quiz portion.
Yeah, very.
Come on, I have a little information.
That was very educational. Thank you very much. Speaking of.
Chair Carter?
Yes.
I just wanted to thank Tracy for coming aboard. And so just a little context. So a few years ago, LAFCO and the port interacted in a way that we had it. And the end result is Tracy and the Port of San Diego, or as we call them, the Unified Port of San Diego District, is now part of the process. And I wanted just to give thanks to Tracy and Scott and the powers to be, because all of you are due paying members of LAFCO, and you may have noticed a reduction in your dues, and that is because Tracy is now cutting checks every year, just like all of you, and we very much appreciate, again, Tracy and Scott's welcoming LAFCO, and sooner than later, as Priscilla mentioned earlier, we're going to be doing our MSR. So thank you again, Tracy.
Thank you. Yes.
To that end, I have no idea, is the airport a district, special district as well?
Airport authority.
It's interesting. So they used to be part of our district. They now pay us, I think, $1 a year for that, the land they're on. I think they're a special district.
Yeah, Pat?
I believe they are a special district similar to the port. I mean, they were carved out from the port. So they are a creature of the legislature like the Port of San Diego, but I believe for all purposes.
I see your dues reduction. With that, speaking of talking fast, we have about 15 minutes left before a hard stop, and Mr. Kennedy is going to talk about development of weighted water rate comparison formula.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. I'm gonna stand right here behind Mr. Bushy, who so publicly said this project would fail last time we talked about it.
So we made him a part of it.
That's right. So he got all told. So again, I'm Tom Kennedy, former member of this committee, but now a consultant for LAFCO, who also thanks the port for contributions. And I've got a slide deck coming up here in a second. So what we were tasked with was looking at water rates, and is there a way to look at through the MSR process, are rates done the right way? Are they being done the wrong way? Whatever, whose rates are good, whose rates are bad. So a subcommittee was set up here, which consisted of Paul, Al, Jack, and Kim, and myself, and we met a number of times and had a lot of email exchanges over the last several months going through this process. So the cost of water is a problem. I'm gonna go fast here because I only have a few minutes. Most people think rates are too high, and most rates have doubled. We saw here on the previous presentations. A lot of political pressure. We've watched the San Diego City Council, the Santa Ana Water Authority go through this. This has become front page news in a lot of places and TV spots. And for the LAFCO nexus, the cost of water, the rising cost of water was the primary focus of applications to LAFCO when Fallbrook and Rainbow needed to do something about the impact of water costs. So when we look at rates, the first question, are there good rates and are there bad rates? Short answer, no. No rate is inherently good or inherently bad. It is marginally better to have a revenue structure that mirrors your expense structure as far as what your fixed costs and your fixed revenues are. And I think we heard that in the Water Authority here where there's an imbalance there. So if you have high fixed costs and low fixed revenue, that's generally not the best structure you can have for financial stability. But water rates are super agency specific. You know, no two agencies are alike, and no two rates will be alike either. And as been mentioned, water rate setting is tightly controlled under Props 26 and 218. There's not a lot of levers for people to pull, and there's a whole cottage industry of lawyers to make sure that you stay on track. So this is a traditional rate comparator. This is one that Liebenheim did, where agencies you see when they're doing, does this thing have a laser? Oh yeah, it does. You know, well, you'll see comparators. Here's our agency versus everyone else. These are made by each agency when they do the rate setting, and you see different versions of them from different agencies, and the math gets a little, you know, I don't want to say manipulated, but they can be done that way. Here's some that I did about 10 years ago at Rainbow, where we're looking at, if you looked at a Liebenheim, this is for 3/4 inch meter with 13 units of water, 1,300 units of water. And, you know, Rainbow wasn't in here, but back in the day when we were part of the Water Authority, Fallbrook and Rainbow were always way on the way right, is the highest. But then if you do the math a little differently, at either 50 units or 100 units, which was about the average in our rural area, Rainbow's rates were the lowest. And so each agency, when they make these water rate comparisons, I'm not saying they manipulate the numbers at the finance department, but they try to make the most positive looking thing for their board rate decision. None of them are done exactly the same, and so they can be misleading. So our goal with this committee was to produce information to help the public and the commission understand why water rates vary, and to have a tool somehow to inform the public and LAFCO whether rates are appropriate or if there might be some things to look at. We have a number of constraints. Again, no good or bad rates. We're using publicly available data. We wanted to use metrics that all agencies publish, so we're not trying to create data that we have to go to each agency and have them create data. And we tried to do things that were simple for people to understand. Caveats are, not all the data is prepared for this use. We're using it as kind of a derivative work, and so it'll contain errors, and they're not exact. These aren't getting into multiple decimal points. These are relative comparisons, and we only looked at a couple of the myriad things possible. So we looked at system density. Places of people have more people to pay bills per mile of pipe generally have lower rates. It has a lowering impact. If you're a very low density area, each customer pays different. We have ranging in the county from about 100 customers per mile of pipe to under 10. And so you can see that there's quite a range. Topography, if you're in a kind of a flat area, it's really easy. If you have an area that has a huge elevation changes and you've got more pump stations, pressure regulating tanks and storage, that tends to increase your rates, not because anything you're doing, just because of the topography of your area. Local water treatment, you got your own treatment plant. Generally, you produce water at a cheaper treatment rate than the wholesale wholesalers rates are. If you're an area of large development activity, look at the city of Carlsbad, where they built out a ton of stuff. Massive amounts of capacity fee money coming in, pushes down the requirement of your operating expenses, which tends to lower rates. If you're an area that has very little development activity, you don't have this other source of money coming in for your capital programs. If you have either high or low cost local supply, high cost being desal, or I'm not sure what this plant produces water at, that it might be marginally more expensive than
$380 an acre.
Oh, so this is a low cost local supply here. But there are going to be plants like Pure Water, San Diego, or the East County plants that are going to be high cost. But so those tend to either have an impact high or low on your rates. Okay, so rough data was collected from all the agencies that I could get offline, but we did have the MSR underway, so we took a closer look at the 3 agencies that are part of the North Coastal MSR. And the work product we came up with was just try to make just kind of simple slider bar charts here. So just to really quickly on here, if your metric is on the left side, it tends to increase your rates. And if your metric's on the right side, each one of these, it tends to lower rate. These aren't exact numbers, it's just kind of relative comparisons. If it neither is impact to raise or lower rates, it kind of sits in the middle. And so if we look at Liebenheim, they do have local treatment and it's cheaper. Their system topography is about average within the county. They don't have a high cost local supply, so that's right in the middle. They've had significant development activity, so that's helped push that bar to the right. Their density is about average, right around average. Most people are right around 50 customers per mile. And then they don't have a cheap local supply. I know they've been trying to get one, but they don't have it. Look at Carlsbad, they do have local treatment, but it's the desal plant, so it pushes it to the left. And their high cost local supply is desal. Topography, they have fairly flat because it's the coastal plain there. And development activity is super high. Carlsbad's like probably #1 in getting cap fees. System density is a little higher than normal, and they don't have a cheap local supply. And then San Diego has local treatment at the Badger plant. They've got a system topography that's low in their area because they're right down on the coast again. They don't have high cost water. They don't have SWAT for development activity, so that goes in the negative for them. But they have a higher than average system density. And for now, the water from Hodges is cheaper than, but it may not be that way forever. So when we take a look at these three, with the Liebenheim economy in the middle, Carlsbad having some things that push it to the lower side, as well as San Diego, and you come back to this chart, you'll see that, you know, and OMW is here, and then San Diego and Carlsbad are to the left. Carlsbad had massive reserves during this review period, so they were able to not have to do as many rate increases because they had developed so much cash from development activity. And sorry, I would go through more of this, but I got 6 minutes left. So what are the optimal rates? Ratepayers want the cheapest rate. Agencies want rates that support their finances and make them stable. For LAFCO, you know, it's a little more nuanced. LAFCO should look at rates that are there to ensure they can reliably produce the municipal service they're assigned as part of their, whatever their district is, water, wastewater, whatever. And the question is, if you can do it now and for the foreseeable future. This is where the tricky part gets in. We also want to look at our rates apportioned equitably amongst the customer base. This was brought up by a commissioner Monday, or last Monday. Unfortunately, we have agencies have very little flexibility here. But the tricky part here is how do we figure out that an agency is doing the rates to support their assets for the long term, right? And so we started looking at capital spending. The provision of water and wastewater agencies, the finances around them are heavily dependent and structured around their capital assets and maintenance of the capital assets, buying, investing. The discussion we had about the water authority over-investing in capital in the past and paying the price now. All these assets have fixed lifespan, all will need rehabilitation replacement. Every agency is in a different span of their lifespan of it. Fallbrook's over 100 years old. Some agencies have got a whole lot of brand new stuff. But if you're doing your asset management appropriately for most agencies and you're spending enough, it's going to increase your rates. If you're not doing it appropriately, it'll lower your rates. So when staff prepares budgets, and many people in this room have done this many times, they always include rate impacts for boards or councils to consider. We've watched this play out at the Water Authority recently, at the city of San Diego, and they're all talking about, is it going to be 6% or 7%? If we do this or that, what's happening? Most agencies balance their budget through their capital programs because you don't really have any other levels to pull. Your wholesale water costs are fixed, you've got staff, and then you got to pay them. And the triage process weeds things out. In the presentation earlier, the Water Authority to get rates down, cut 10 million off the capital. That's how it's done. So investments that everyone believes are needed to keep the system up and running properly are the first ones that get cut in order to meet the political pressure to keep rates at a certain level. So most pipelines last 50 to 100 years, or 75 years, maybe 100. Most agencies have capital placements go into that. When I started at Rainbow, it would have been over 1,000 years to get around there. Liebenheim had a study done recently where it showed it was about 800 years, and it would cost about $50 million extra a year to get that number down. So it's significant on an agency of the budget that they have. So pretty much double rates. And so there's no super simple metric for us to use here. We look at two imperfect metrics. Capital spending is a percentage of operating expense, and capital spending is a percentage of depreciation expense. Both of these metrics have flaws. They can't account for large single projects that are going on in a given year. They also count it, we didn't go through and figure out, was that CIP spending on pipelines and assets, or was it a new headquarters building or some other type of project? And so I had the fun task of going through the ACFRs for every agency in the county over 5 years and calculating the averages for these things. Sweetwater, I can only find 2 years on the website. And I didn't do any evaluation on what the CIP spending was for. Sorry for going so fast, but I see the clock ticking. So when we look at this one's a little harder to read, I guess, at this scale. This is the 5-year average percentage of CIP spending compared to operating expenses. The sweet spot in the middle seems to be about 15%. People are spending about 15% of their operating expenses on that. You'll see a couple at the far end, that's Fallbrook, Oceanside, and San Diego. There was some significant capital spending going on by those agencies related to different projects that are going on. And one stands out at the bottom end here at San Diego being very low. And then, so that's telling you that, hey, I think that when I look at this data, that there's being distorted by individual capital projects like Pure Water San Diego, Pure Water Oceanside, and the conjunctive use project at Fallbrook.
And we're letting them know we need 15 minutes, so.
Oh, okay. All right. If Rodak wasn't here, we would have had way more time.
I got questions for you.
Oh, yeah, I know. I got them all. So now when we look at depreciation ratio, your depreciation expense looks at each year how much your system aging out financially, and you're setting aside your depreciation expense. What we see here is that in the midpoint, we see 1 to 1.5, a ratio of 1 to 1.5. In the middle, we see a number of agencies up over 2. But then we see Oceanside, Escondido, Lakeside, interestingly, up there high. Some of these have to do with big capital projects. Other ones have to do with systems who have low depreciation expense due to the system already have been depreciated. You know, these things that might have been built out in the 60s and 70s have now been fully depreciated, and so they're not showing up in the depreciation expenses much. It doesn't really reflect it. But notably, you'll see that San Diego is still way down here at the bottom. And so the takeaway from this is just a comparator to other agencies. So, but some inferences can be drawn. Like if you're spending less than about 15% of your operating expenses on capital, you're probably spending too low. We can't say definitively, but probably spending too little. If your CIP to depreciation ratio is less than 1.0, you're probably spending too little. Again, we don't know unless you dig deeper into it, but this would be a tool to quickly inform LAFCO staff or people who are doing MSR that, hey, this is an area we might want to look into. San Diego does stand out in both these charts. Like if you end up way on the bottom of both of them, it's likely you've been underspending. I've talked to the people in San Diego, and since the end of the review period in 2023, they have updated master plans and changed their capital spending program. It's just for this 5-year window, they really weren't spending anything. And so that's a problem. So the real takeaway from an asset management focused perspective here is that most agencies have rates that are too low. Nobody wants to hear that, but they're too low. If you're doing comprehensive asset management, you're going to have things in your system that include a detailed asset registry, work management that tracks work, leaks, failures up against each asset. It might be hundreds of thousands of assets in your asset registry, but you need to have that. You need to have a continuous condition assessment program that through the work you do and other assessments, track real carefully the condition of each asset. The pipes that fail aren't necessarily the ones that are the oldest. The pipes that fail are ones that are either in corrosive soils or had poor construction methods and things like that. They all fail at different rates. You need to track that very carefully so you can target your capital spending. And the last leg of this is your capital spending needs to be informed by the condition assessment so that you can continuously each year refresh your data on where's the new hotspots on our systems that are failing, and then target the money you have to do the most benefit to the system. These things usually have systems like consequence of failure or likelihood of failure analyses done that create risk matrices that are similar to things they do in emergency services as well, to where you look at where do we need to spend our money. If agencies wait until it's too late to get up to speed on managing their assets, then things start to cascade on them, and the provision of municipal services can be hampered. As Gary Arant likes to say, and I want to make sure Gary gets the credit on this quote, you can replace your water mains 3 feet at a time, responding to leaks, or 3 miles at a time. It's much cheaper per mile to do it 3 miles at a time, but a lot of people don't want to make that investment. At Rainbow, when I started there, we were just fighting fires constantly with mainframes. The detachment process was 100% related to the board's desire to find money for capital replacement. And if you look at Rainbow, their rates haven't changed much since pre-detachment, because that money is being put back into the community to fix the pipelines in Rainbow service area that are World War II era stuff. So next steps here, we want to get feedback from this group, the LAFCO staff. If anybody got any ideas for different metrics or different approaches, we'd like to do it. We want to find ways to refine the metrics we've got. Is there a different way to define CIP spending, or would more data help? At this point, I've only been authorized to work with agencies that are in the North County Coastal to get more detail. It would require getting a lot more data from each agency. I was asked to have this group think about identifying ways to address equity issues, because that's been brought up to the commission. The challenge is how to do that legally. And from a water rate setting standpoint, very few levers to consider. So that might be one for the commission. Unless you can change the state of California Constitution, there's not going to be much the water agency can do. And then the real thing is that when we're done with this, how do we develop messaging for the commission and the public, right? What are the messages we're trying to send, and what are the messages, how do we do this effectively? One of my messages to people is that everybody's water rates are probably too low. And nobody wants to hear that. And so, but I think that most water agency people, and you guys can all get this feedback here, will probably recognize that if you had it your way, looking at your knowledge of your capital needs, your water rates would be higher to support them. And that's true, I believe, very broadly in the county. There's very few people who are going, man, our water rates are too high. We have so much money, we don't know what to do with it. We don't have anything else to do. Everybody's got a long list of projects they know are important that they aren't doing because there's no money to do it. So for that, we'll open it up so Mark can ask questions.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you to the committee members for the work on this. My only suggestion, I didn't realize you were just picking the 13 units as an example.
Yeah.
That is a leave-behind low water use customer. I know the countywide average is 17, ours is 23. Because everybody has tiers except for Valley Center, maybe the sample point and is a high, medium, and low, and like a 3 comparison. And then on the affordability issue, one of the things we do at Leave Behind is we take our property tax revenue and we allocate that to the lowest tier to kind of help with the low water use. I don't know that every entity gets the property tax revenue, but you obviously have to take non-rate revenue to look at that equity issue. Those are my only 2 comments. Mr. Beatty?
I was gonna, a couple quick things. One is this gonna supplement or potentially replace, we talked before, LAFCO does a financial analysis that, you're working with what you got, but it's hard to really make heads or tails of it because you're just using a single year sort of factor usually against last year. Is there any thought of maybe using this to help maybe sort of replace some of that or
add to it? So Tom, could you go back to that third to last there? So Tom has been asked by the commission essentially, hey, come up with some better benchmarks that we can use that are vetted through the practitioners, but makes sense for us as policymakers. So those 2 comments, if you're spending less than 50% of your operating expenses in terms of capital investment, that would be a red flag. And then the other one, the ratio 1-to-1 of your capital investment on depreciation. I see this as becoming examples. If this gets vetted and everyone agrees, these are good benchmarks, becoming highlighted aspects of the MSR.
But are you going to replace or potentially replace then the financial analysis that you're doing currently?
Not replace, but add to it.
Okay. The only thing I would suggest potentially is maybe now that this is kind of moving past, is maybe to revisit in the same sort of way those financial metrics. It's sort of a thing to go, did they really make sense?
And I hear that, and Tom's been making that comment on your behalf. Here's the issue. the service reviews go to cover cities too. And so perhaps a lot of our financials are oriented towards more general purpose and general fund related activities. So there is a need to have an apple to apple look. Tom's helping us create some carve outs where infrastructure intensive agencies like yourself, we're getting more meaningful data. That's where Tom's, and I would assume for the fire, maybe not to the same level of water and wastewater, but you're asset heavy too, in terms of the equipment that you have. And so whether these ratios work on your end would be of interest to us.
And then the other thing to keep in mind in the equity issue, you know, we just had this long discussion about, well, here's everyone's fixed revenue. Let's just make our fixed cost fixed revenue, which sounds great if you're an economist. But from a cost equity standpoint, that's a problem, right? So if your wholesale rate is going to be mostly fixed, and then your retail rate is going to be mostly fixed, who gets hit most with that is the low use customer. And so I think the fixed to variable issue is only a problem if you're overestimating your demands. And so I think there needs to be a little bit of tempering that, understanding that the more fixed revenue you have under, you know, the 218 requirements, the more of an equity issue you create. And some agencies can use property tax if they have a small amount of low income customers and a large amount of high income customers. But to try to solve that equity issue at an agency specific entity instead of in a bigger picture or the state or doesn't really work. That's really an issue that's broader. So I think it's important to bring that into that rate stability is with that you create an equity issue. The potential, if you're trying to help low income customers, you're doing the opposite when you move more to fixed costs.
I do think to a certain degree, you can have these as kind of like benchmarks added into the MSRs, but then you'd have to have the analysis to that specific agency. Like, so what are they spending it on? Do they have this equity issue that they can?
I think that's the right way to look at this, because what LAFCO should really, you know, the agencies know what they should be doing, but there are agencies whose boards have been refused to raise rates. I mean, heck, San Diego City Council said, we're just not going to do it. We're not going to pay it. Right, things like that. And what happens is atrophy, and the system starts degrading over time. And it may not be bad for that board in that year, even the next election cycle. But it you know, out in the future, it's going to get real bad. You're going to have a massive spike.
So the collaboration between fire and water. So Rancho Santa Fe's got this anomaly that happens where a 5,000 square foot home gets demolished and a 15,000 square foot home gets replaced.
That's what it's awesome.
What's the fire? So we have.
Where's the equity there?
So we have to look at the fire flow, and you look at the age that Santa Fe Irrigation District has. I don't know some of the ages of the pipe. So there's a 6-inch out there in the street for a 15,000 square foot home, and that's just one of them on that street. So if that thing were to burn, do I have enough water coming out? So if you want to develop or you want to put that 15,000 square foot in, cool, you got 600 feet of lineal 10-inch now.
Right.
Do they balk at that? Heck yeah. All right, then reduce your square footage and do 5 hour. And we put other modifications onto them and they fight it. But we're trying to collaborate and solve the problem that we both have. He needs to increase his water line and replace it because of age. And we want to make sure we can put that thing out. So
yeah, it's not a problem. We have a fault for it.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's a knowledge,
problem.
and you don't have to put that on video.
We're down to 4 minutes for Mr. Beebe and Mr. Martinez to wrap it up. Oh my gosh, I did it again.
Sorry.
I'm so.
He's
I'm
smarter
sorry.
than me, so.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bushy.
You know, just commend Tom for kind of herding cats for a couple of months, and when this discussion did start, it came into as apples to apples comparator of water rates, and I think what it's evolved to, just kind of for the rest of the committees the committee members who weren't involved with this is exactly what we've just been talking about. Keen mentioned is developing a set of metrics that can be used as part of an MSR to analyze the appropriateness of water or utility rates as opposed to comparing to one another, because it's very difficult based on all the variables that Tom went through, so commend Tom.
Man, the quickness that I almost sent you to the oxygen tent mid presentation there. At first, they didn't tell me on that extra 15 minutes until like.
Yeah,
almost
you
done.
were the most struggling.
Oh, we did it.
But in terms of equity, all the things that Jack and Kim have mentioned, it's a quagmire for public agencies that are subject to 218 at the retail level.
There's a simple solution though. The state could let people pay their water bills with PBT cards. If you're in the food stamp program, you're in the lower tier. And if they could just come to one of the probably whoop, there's already a system for that, but they're not gonna.
So with that, I'll yield to Mr. Martinez before we run out of time.
I'm gonna be very brief. Sweetwater Authority has an affordability program for senior citizens and low income that's legal. You may wanna contact ED&K to get details. And it's in the non-revenue water funding is part of the answer. Right. So there is a mechanism.
Mr. Rorak.
So Tom, I gotta ask you, so which of the 24 water agencies in San Diego County do you recommend we consolidate for better economies of scale?
Otai and Helix, I think.
Oh.
I don't have any recommendations. I'm a fan of consulting.
Thank you, Tom, for the presentation and all the work that went into it.
I still want to get feedback, but so
All
I'm
right,
sure we'll send it around.
so what is the preferred mechanism for feedback? Is it to send you comments based on this? I don't know.
I think we're going forward, we're still gonna use the North County crew right now as our data sample. Email Tom, Tom's gonna work with the committee, and then Tom's giving LAFCO staff feedback in real time, and we're gonna keep going down this path.
Potential
The one thing that
suggestion.
came out from Kim was the high, low, and I thought we talked ag or something too.
To do different.
Couple
The
of
other reason for those charts was to show like, hey, these can be shown a number of different ways, but that's the traditional.
So like I know for us, our average customer is 23 units, our rates are kind of crafted around
Right.
that. And each agency has a different average.
So when you look at each agency, put those up, your agency shows a different spot, depending on which numbers
Depending
we
on
chose.
which, and so maybe pick three, a low,
Yeah.
average and high, or something.
Just
I'm
a
gonna try to steer
suggestion
away
on,
from those.
on steps forward, that was a quick presentation. I think it's gonna be difficult for the other committee members to provide comments. If this isn't a severe timing thing, what I suggest is that a written summary be provided to the committee for our, January meeting, and it goes out with the agenda so you can have a more effective, give and take.
Yeah, I can produce a written report that has a little more stuff for it.
Any committee member reports of urgency? Okay, executive officer report?
Just if Priscilla and Erica could give a quick update on the nomination process for the special district elections. Committee elections.
So Erica sent out a notice of committee elections, but I'll let her provide some details as far as some dates to keep in mind.
The nominations have to be received by Friday, October 31st. And I did get one from Chief Sims. So we have one so far.
My board nominated me Wednesday night.
Yay.
My board nominated.
Yesterday, and I think you're.
Monday night.
Okay,
I have mine next Monday.
okay, good, thank you. So
And
that's
I have heard there's interest from new organizations as well.
good, okay.
So all of us have to do that?
No, they sent out a list. There's about 6 or 7 of us that are.
Yeah, I think there's 7 of you based on who had the earlier.
Expired.
Yes,
Immigration
yes,
terms.
yes,
Yes.
yeah.
The
Most
most
expired, yeah,
And when do the ballots, will the ballots go out in November, I'm assuming then? Okay.
yes,
And then effective on January, whoever the new, okay.
yep, yes.
When's the ballot due?
I'll look, I don't have it.
We
yet,
usually
but
do
it'd
a thing at CSDA, no?
Or we give speeches.
be- Yeah,
That's a lot of people.
Man.
When's our next CSDA dinner?
else for the good of the order before we adjourn? Okay, I believe we are now adjourned and we will be taking the tour of the.
Yeah,